All right, we're good. We're on air.
All right. Hi, George. This is Kara. I
Hi,
am
Kara.
still working on getting all of our people in here, and I'm checking to see if I have people viewing. So hopefully they'll be joining us. And for those of you who are with us, I don't think anyone is yet, but if you're watching on the video stream, George has joined us here from many miles away, and we're really grateful for his time. A number of you have posted questions, and so I'm going to toss one of those at George, and then make sure you guys can all access with me. Um, so one of the questions that people keep asking, and they keep coming up both at in the class we're having as well as the questions they asked you, is how do we make that leap from the way it is to the way we want it to be? That what's like an instigator of that change? Do you have any ideas for us or examples?
Well, I think what's really crucial, especially in the notion of leadership, is that we seem to know we want something to be different, but we don't know how to describe it. And I think that's really important to define some of these ideas of what we're looking for, because you can have this vision of what learning can look like in a classroom, but if you can't articulate it to a teacher or a parent, then it's just kind of like we're have this vision that's constantly out of reach. And I think one of the graphics that was shared in the book was that notion of 8 things to look for in today's classroom. And what I wanted to be able to do is basically say, like, here are these things that I think are essential to the work that we are doing right now, and actually will make a bigger vision come alive if you do this. As I talk about in the book, the notion of kind of sharing those 8 things makes it a little bit smaller and measurable steps, so people feel that they're building confidence and competence along the way. And so I think that if you can start to communicate that vision clearly of what you want it to look like in the classroom, and also help by creating those experiences in your professional learning opportunities, so people feel something different, they don't just hear about something different. I think that's a really crucial step to helping kind of change what learning looks like with our students.
Mm-hmm. Um, I have a question here from someone who's talking about the difference between what we see in high school and what we see in college. And I think that's a common question. I know we've discussed it at more meetings
Yeah.
than I can count. And how do we move that change up the ladder beyond K-12?
Well,
Any
what's
suggestions?
interesting is that um, I think that if you look at the college system, and it was interesting because, like, I work in so many varied places, but some of the colleges are starting to look for different things as well, and they're wondering when the K-12 system is going to start to pick it up. So it just depends on where you're at, right? It's like, it's never seemingly enough. And I think that we need to have some conversations on um, not just in what we're hoping for when students go into post-secondary, but also how do they get into the process, and typically it's been like what their grades are, and in the States, SAT scores and things like that. But I'm seeing more and more universities asking for, what's your digital presence look like, because their reputation is huge to them. And a kid with a large social network that might have good grades but is sharing negative things could actually negatively impact that school, no matter how well they do in school. And check the boxes that are there. So I think that it's really trying to create some common bonds. And I think I'm really big into the notion of portfolios for students, because I think they have so many opportunities, not just for post-secondary, but for creating opportunities for kids outside of it. And I think trying to find some common links, and I think that's a really good one, is that there's some really powerful learning that can happen in portfolios, but and I know more and more universities are looking at it, but do the schools or the high schools actually creating these things, or the K-12 system actually creating this? And so trying to find some of these common links that are beneficial to both of us, that we can start some of these conversations.
Hmm. So if I'm just going to kind of try and build on that. So if the same person asked a question regarding to you talked about no people that are they're going to say no no matter what.
Right.
They're just turned off, and honestly, it isn't just about technology. For some people it's technology, for some
Yeah.
people it's social studies. They're just people that are not going
Well,
to be not willing to
I've
change.
dealt with teachers that say I'm not open to learning.
Right,
And
and I will say I'm so happy that it's the minority. The
yeah,
majority of the teachers that I see, and I see so many just like you, they're excited. They want what's best for their kids, and they will do anything they can to make
right.
what's best for their kids. They just don't always know how, or they want some help. So, for those people that are just no, 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 do you have any suggestions for us? Many of the people in our group here are integrationists, administrators, curriculum developers, professional development leaders in their districts, and are working with those teachers and want to help them, but they're not sure how.
Well, I think that when you look at some people that are adamant that they're not going to move forward, um, they they might not. I don't know how to put this, but they may be the minority, but the majority isn't necessarily swayed one way or the other. And I think you got to really work to that middle group
Mhm.
because the culture starts to take over. And I'll give you a really simple example. If you, if I go into workshops, and one of the things that I'll say, and it's more and more now, is, and especially more than 3 or 4 years ago, how many, and I'll ask the question, how many of you are on Twitter? And I make people put their hands up. And I used to ask that question, and you'd see 20, 30% maybe of the room do this, but now it's 80 or 90%. And a lot of those teachers that, aren't on it and see that will spend the next hour of my talk signing up for Twitter because they're like, everyone else is doing this, and why am I not doing this? And I think that it's just kind of an analogy of how sometimes they might not be convinced by a person, but sometimes they will be pushed by the group and by the culture. Because I don't think, as much as you deal with teachers that maybe aren't open to new learning or open to trying new things, I also believe there's this kind of innate sense that I don't want to be the one that's the weakest of the group. And so when I'm seeing everyone else doing this, I gotta pick it up. And so that little pressure that comes from the group or the culture starts to change things. And I think that focusing on that middle group that is could go one way or the other is really crucial. And it's the same thing in a classroom as well.
Great, I appreciate that. I'm actually flipping back and forth here. We've got 13 people joining us so far.
Okay,
So,
great.
and a lot of people still posting to my help saying, how do I get there? So I'm trying to switch between a few things here. And right now I'm going to get back to our questions. Let's see what else do we have for questions. I'll try and go out of order so I can get to some different people's links. Here's one. I feel like I'm innovative, at least at my school level, especially
Yeah.
when it comes to technology. I love and truly have a passion for the big ideas and creating. However, this often gets me called in to do the extra work. I'm perceived as the person with too many irons in the fire. I'm not getting everything done that I need to get done.
Right.
My peers get tired of the overwhelming, and I think that's part of what we haven't gotten to in your book about the simplifying piece. But her question is, do you have any advice about how I can continue to be innovative without hurting my relationships with my peers?
Well, I think that, and I kind of understood I hopefully I'm not taking this out of context of what I just heard, but as a principal, there's some monotonous parts of the job that have to be done, and so I do want you to try new things, but if I send you something that is kind of a pain in the butt, you don't really see it as part of the job. My job as a principal is to take as many things off your plate as possible. But if I do that, then I expect the things that need to be done, because if someone doesn't get it done, I'm spending time chasing down people to contact my superintendent because I have deadlines that I got to meet, and some of those things. And so I don't know if that was the exact same question, or the exact question. And I think it's kind of trying to find that balance of pushing the boundaries, but making sure we still are accountable to a public. We're expected to do certain things, and that's why I talk about that notion of innovative inside of the box, because we still work within a box. There's still expectations of what we do as an educator, but the artistry of how we teach is not, defined, and I think that's where we have a lot of flexibility in the work that we're doing. But we still, like if you were as innovative as you are, as innovative as you want to be, if you don't get report cards done because that's expected, then we have issues, right? And it will cause some strains in relationships, definitely in schools. And I don't know if I took that question the wrong way, but that's just kind of what I heard.
No, and I talk fast. That's always my constant curse and my overwhelming issue with that. Let's see. I have another one here that's just come into my email, so I didn't get a chance to give you this one ahead of time. So forgive me. But one person was asking. You talk a lot about reflection in your book.
Yeah.
And I personally am thrilled to read that every time I read that. I think that effect of metacognitive learning is so important.
Yeah.
Her question is, what is your routine when it comes to reflecting on your work? I mean, how do you go about doing that, or your process?
Well, I think that I try to carve some time out near the end of my day, and I do have a different job. But I think it's really important. It's not that the time of like that you should do it at the end of the day, but you should find that process. And I really try to think about what we're doing. But I try to blog probably 2 to 3 times a week. And I think that blogging is a really powerful tool for reflection because of the openness of it. So it really pushes me to really think of the other people that may be involved in some of the decisions I make, some of the interactions that I have, because I'm going to post it publicly, right? And so there's a really great quote, and I'm pretty sure I have in the book, from Clive Thompson. He said, "Anyone can win an argument inside their head, but when you face an audience, you have to be truly convincing." And I think that when you push yourself, and it's interesting because when I ask people to like share their thoughts in like a Google form, but I tell them that it's going to be open to everybody in the room and the world, they kind of freak out a little bit if they've never done it before, because they're like, oh my God, everyone can see what I'm thinking. And I'm like, that's kind of a good thing that you're thinking about that, because it does help to shape your thought, because now you're having to think about who is the audience that is going to be able to see this. How am I expressing myself in a clear way? And it pushes your thinking in that process. So I try to reflect every day, but I try to openly reflect probably 2 to 3 times a week. And if I'm dead tired and I got nothing left in me, I still do it, because I know teachers do things when they're dead tired as well. And so I do push myself, because I think it really sharpens my saw in the work that I do, that I make time to think about why am I doing it, how am I doing it, what am I doing. Those are really crucial questions, and we become so blind to our own practice because we just do what we've done. And I think that stopping and thinking is really crucial.
All right, excellent. Yeah, I've got another question here for you. And by the way, I appreciate your saying that you appreciate our time, and that's really valuable to us. The other question I was going to ask here, I'm actually reading the comments here. People are posting, and people are saying,
"No, that's cool.
I can't get on from Mexico." A lot of people are on spring break on our end, so I understand what they're talking about here. When you were talking, by the way, about your blog, I just want to remind everybody that you can follow George on Twitter at @GA_Kouros. And
Yep.
George, by the way, today, did anybody tell you how to share your Google form? Did you find that your embed form?
Yeah, immediately. Actually, I was like struggling with it.
I know, and
I'm like, why am I struggling? I could just ask Twitter, and they'll tell me in half a second. And so
it popped up, and I popped up on my screen because I had Twitter on my phone, but I was in a meeting, and I thought, yeah, George, I could help you, but probably I should pretend I'm in this meeting. So that's that power of Twitter that I love.
Right.
Let's see, what do we have? Some more questions. This was one that just struck me, and just I responded to this question and said that it was kind of horrifying. This is a teacher who had previously taught in California.
Okay.
And she said she never knows what to do about being innovative when a district hands her a developed program, something that's packaged and says you have to do it this way.
Right.
She said that when she was in California, there's actually a state-mandated compliance committee, and I'm quoting,
Right.
who make surprise inspections of classrooms to make sure that you were doing the last lessons exactly as they wanted you to do it. And how, or is it even possible to be innovative in a situation like that?
Yeah, we don't have anything like that in Canada, and I don't know many places that are similar to that. And I think if it's scripted, then you're in trouble. And so if it's like you need to be saying this on this day at this time, and I've heard of these things, I've never actually walked into a classroom where that's a reality, because how could you script teaching? Like, you have no idea what's going to happen any day. So, what if a kid goes, nuts that one day and has an issue or whatever? And yeah, like you say, sorry, I know you're upset, but we're going to have to stick on the script here. So, or understanding like where a kid is learning, like if they're not where they need, where they have an understanding, how do you move on to the next step? But if that being said, if there's like mandates where, I expect these items to be taught, I think that's where the flexibility comes in. And I think that if you can show that those expectations are being met, I think, like I said, there's some artistry in that, and in how you teach. So I can take a lesson and I can solely teach the objective, or I can take a lesson, teach the objective, but teach a ton of other things like digital citizenship, etiquette, communication with other people, and so all these other skills that are going to be beneficial to a kid outside of this. And so, like I said, there's some artistry in how we teach this. It's not simply what we teach.
Yeah, it's not just an art. It's not just a science. It's the art piece as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Related to that, in the U.S., I know you're perfectly aware of the fact that we have a lot of mandates related to standardized testing or high-stakes testing.
Yeah.
And here's a question, and I'll read the question exactly, but basically she's saying, what are your suggestions for finding a balance between the important elements of a teacher's reality, which is not always as innovative, and still trying to bring that in? And I think maybe you hit on part of it with your idea of that reflection in the blogging, that you can take some of your innovation maybe outside of your day. But anything else you can add to that?
I think that there's a lot of interest in, and I'm trying to articulate this as clearly as possible, and trying to make it how it sounds in my head, come out of my mouth, but that there's a lot of interest in, students, having passion-based opportunities, and, if they don't enjoy what they learn, it's really hard. But I also think of how much I wish I could still play piano, and that I wanted to go further with that. And it was, when I was a kid, monotonous. It was a lot of, stuff that I found extremely boring. And the balance is that, sometimes we teach things, something that kids may not actually appreciate at this moment, but that they had at least the exposure and the willingness to, or we had the willingness to teach them at this point. That's something I had to think about, because it's not just like, hey, let's always tap into their passions, which is a great, in theory, but in reality, if a kid says, what, I hate reading and writing, they're going to be limited in opportunities if they can't read and write. If we just say, well, let's, just do all these other things. And so I think that there's camps definitely that are, so forward, like so about the basics. It's all about the basics. It's all about the basics. And then there's camps that are like, oh, we need to like have kids creating all the time. And I'm like, I think there's a really beautiful middle point.
Balance.
Yeah, and like, for example, I always use this analogy because I thought it was so beautifully put, was John Medina, the author of Brain Rules. He spoke at ISTE a couple years ago, and he said, if you only have kids creating without any content, it's the equivalent of playing the air guitar. You know the motions, but you don't really know what you're doing. And so I thought it was a really, because I play guitar, and it made a lot of sense to me, because, if I can strum and do these things, but I don't actually know what chords are or how to play chords, then these things don't actually matter. And so I think that it's not just about what you learn, it's what you create with what you learn. And I think that it's important that both elements are there. And so it's not about every single minute that you teach is innovative. It's finding those things here and there that really push your learning, and constantly like thinking about what you're doing. And I always use the question when I talk with large groups of teachers, like, what is actually more important to teach today, a blog or an essay? And a lot of people automatically assume, because they see me as comfortable with technology, it's a blog. And I'm actually, well, I don't have an answer. But why I'm asking that question is I want you to think about it. I want you to think about it because we just teach the essay because we've taught the essay, not because we think about this. And like, we still, in where I live, we still standardize tests on kids writing newspaper articles, but not one person I know would say, hey, you know what, it would be a good idea, let's invest in a newspaper company, right? Like, they're all dying, and we're still teaching kids how to write something like this. And it's not that writing is not important, but it's going to go in different mediums where, having videos and pulling tweets and sharing different media is actually going to be an important component of it that you can actually do. But when you do those things, you're not only teaching kids to embed videos and create them or whatever, you're teaching them to read and write. And you see there's an intersection of, the basics and innovation in that is really going to serve a kid, well longer or later on in life.
All right. Here's a different kind of question for you.
Sure.
Oh, and by the way, when you were speaking about the not learning to read and write, my son was in third grade before he learned to use the scissors. Dumb as that is, he refused to pick up his scissors. I don't know why. He's stubborn as all get out, but his art teacher in third grade made him learn how to use the scissors.
There you go.
And you'd think that you'd just see people know and you'd know how, but when you've never picked up a scissors till third grade, you have no clue what to do with it.
That makes sense.
So
that makes sense.
Nothing like a stubborn kid. Okay, another question for you. This teacher wants to know if you're going to be at the ISTE conference this summer. That's her first question. This is a series.
Okay, yeah, no, I'll be at ISTE. I'm doing a session there. I'll probably only be there for a day, but I will be there.
You're joining us at ISTE, and for those of you watching, so am I, if you're as excited about me being at ISTE as you are about George being at ISTE. No one's ever too concerned, but I did get accepted to present on the playground this weekend.
That's awesome.
I feel good about that.
That's good. Great.
Another, the Ed Tech Coaches Playground, in case you really want to be there. Another question is, as a follow-up, are there other conferences around the U.S. besides the TIES conference, which I know you really support because you were our most excellent keynote presenter this year, but are there other conferences in the U.S. that you would suggest people check out?
You know what? I'm actually speaking at I don't want to say this because I'm speaking at it, but it's a conference in Chicago. It's called iEngage Berwyn. I can't remember. I don't know if I'm saying it right. And it's in the Chicago area. And why I'm really interested in it is because I'm pretty sure, and I've never been there, but from what I know, it's going to be held at a school. And part of the day is actually looking at practice and actually seeing what kids are doing. And things like EduCon do that very nicely. And I look at some of those conferences that might not be as a larger scale. And what people don't really know about me is that I am somewhat of an introvert. I like my time alone. And gigantic conferences, although they're amazing and great opportunities, they do often overwhelm me. And so I really like those ones, with smaller groups and participants, and it's not just a chance to play, but there's lots of opportunities to network and learn from each other. And they have not 5-minute breaks in between sessions because you're running from one session to the other, but they have half hour, and you can kind of just sit and relax and talk about and build relationships. You might talk about education, but you might talk about sports, and I think those are really powerful conferences. So I would start looking, and I'm sure the Berwyn's going to be a great one there. I'm excited. I'm actually going early before I present because I want to see some of the things that are going on in the classrooms as well, even though I'm going there to speak. But I think just kind of looking for more of those conferences where we have opportunities to see what kids are doing in the classrooms, because I think there's no better than PD than watching other teachers teach, and I think that's a really great opportunity.
Great. George has to leave us now, folks. He very kindly carved out this half hour, but he actually has another engagement in 1 minute.
Right.
So we're going to let him go. Thanks a lot, George, and everybody watching. we'll be doing a little follow-up of this in our coming week in the class. Thanks, George.
Great. Thanks for having me. And if anybody watching or sees this has any questions about the book, you can tweet me, email me. I try my best to respond to as many people as possible. It does become a lot sometimes, but I still try to keep up with it when I can, other than family time. So I hope everyone's having a great day, and thanks for your interest in the book and all that you do.
Thanks again, George, for your time. I
Thanks,
appreciate
guys.
it.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.